The ACC Championship game. Number 17 Clemson clinching a college football playoff spot with a 34-31 win over number 8 SMU, setting up a nightmare conversation for the College Football Playoff Committee between SMU and Alabama. We'll see how that shakes out very soon in the official 12-team bracket. Let's go over this game, though, starting off with the highest grade players with the Clemson Tigers. Bryant Wesco Jr., we'll talk about him a little bit later. True freshman wide receiver, 79.1 grade for the Tigers. Another true freshman, linebacker Sammy Brown, 76.6 grade. Edge defender TJ Parker, 73.8. Barrett Carter, another linebacker, 71.4. Ashton Hampton, the corner, 70.7. And the quarterback Cade Klubnik with a 65.8 grade. Let's go over to SMU with their highest graded players in this loss. Ahmad Moses, 87.9 grade, the safety. Kobe Wilson, the linebacker, 78.8. Anthony Booker Jr., the defensive tackle, 76.8. Elijah Roberts, the edge defender, 76.5. Isaiah Nokobia, the safety, 73.3. And Kevin Jennings with a 71.6 grade. Dalton, for you, the stat that told the story of this game.
Okay, so a lot went wrong early. Pretty much everything went wrong early in the first quarter for SMU. In this game, you had a couple of turnovers, bad turnovers from Kevin Jennings. They weren't finding it on defense. They spotted Clemson a 21-7 lead. Everything went wrong in the first half. But if they make the playoff, especially, just getting back in this game is one accomplishment. If they make the playoff, I have to give Kevin Jennings a ton of credit. He was their highest graded offensive player. And in the second half of this game, and I'm sitting there in the third quarter watching this as we're also watching the Oregon game, and they're still kind of running the ball with Brashard Smith, and they're down a couple of scores. They're down 24-7. And I'm like, just let Kevin Jennings take all the swings he can. Just let him take the game over. And if he can't do it, you lose anyway because you lost in the first quarter. Just let him do it. Second half, he took this game over.
Yeah.
21-30, 212 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 big-time throw, 84.3 passing grade. Under pressure, clean pockets. Clemson sent a lot of heat at him. Jennings kept his composure. And this was another one where Rhett Lashley said, listen, guys, this first half, this was awful. This was probably the worst half of football we've played all season. Let's just come out, play one drive at a time, offense and defense, get one stop at a time. And I thought SMU's defense, they did a spectacular job just keeping them in this game because this is the type of game when it goes wrong like it did for SMU in the first quarter with all the mistakes and the turnovers and everything. In a conference title game, especially against a team like Clemson, this game easily could have been 49-10. They could have just rolled over after the first quarter and said, man, we blew it. We blew it in the first quarter, and that's it, and our season's over. Second half, Jennings was great. They battled. They battled to the absolute very end, and I'll tell you what, too. Clemson, responding after all of that with SMU tying the game in the last 20 seconds with the kick return, the Antonio Williams catch, and how about the Nolan Hauser kick?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
ridiculous.
Is that the biggest field goal we've seen all season?
I think it was, yeah.
56-yarder.
Send your team to the playoff, yeah.
When he had never kicked a game winner before, and his career long was 51.
Yeah.
And he hits a 56-yarder in that spot as a freshman.
To go to the playoff, yeah.
To go to the playoff. That's the kick of the season. But I just have to give credit to Kevin Jennings because even in a losing effort, I think we agree. Most people are on this now. SMU should be in the playoff. The two losses are by a field goal to BYU, who's going to finish in the top 15, 18, and Clemson, who. I mean, they won the ACC now, and they're going to be the 4th seed. Oh, no, they might not be the 4th seed. They'll be in the top 12.
Yeah.
They'll be a playoff team, obviously.
They'll be 11 or 12, depending on what they do with SMU.
SMU should be in. That's where I'm sitting on this. I think that's where a lot of people are sitting on this, and it's because, if nothing else, Kevin Jennings carried them all the way back to a tie game with 19 seconds left. I think was on the clock when they scored that touchdown with Roger Daniel. I mean, just. They kept themselves in this thing. And you have to give them so much credit for battling back in this. Even though they didn't end up with the end result they wanted and winning the conference, they should still be in the playoff, and it's because of the way Kevin Jennings played in the second half.
If they were – so it's 24-7 at halftime. If they lost by 17 –
No, yeah, they're not getting in.
They're not getting in.
And I'll tell you what, it's really symbolic, too, of the way Kevin Jennings' season went, right? First half in this game, first quarter especially, couple bad turnovers. We're doubting him. We're like, oh, man, is this where it's going to be finally Kevin Jennings falls apart? Earlier in the season, you remember their first 3-4 games, the BYU loss. Why aren't they starting Preston Stone? What's the deal here? And then they turn to Jennings, and they get on fire, and they get themselves, we think, into the playoffs. I mean, it's symbolic of their whole season, and we got to give Rhett Lashley a lot of credit, too, because that's a gutsy move. after the year Preston Stone had last year before he got hurt.
Yeah.
To turn to Jennings and go, all right, it's all yours. First year in the ACC. Let's go. You got it. And he carried them this far. And I know they didn't get a win in this game, but they played like champions, especially in the second half.
Yeah, we'll get into the playoff conversation because I think it's a fascinating one after we get through these numbers. But I'll go with SMU in the first half, negative .311 EPA per play is the reason why they just weren't able to come back in the second half. I mean, because they really were that bad in the first half. They outscored Clemson in the second half 24-10, but like I said, they were down 24-7 at halftime. In the first half, they averaged 4.5 yards per play, 4.4 yards per pass in the first half. 2 turnovers in the first half, like you mentioned. Kevin Jennings had a 51.4 passing grade in the first half with 2 turnover-worthy plays. They only scored on 12.5% of their possessions in the first half, Dalton. I mentioned before how Oregon scored on 71% of their possessions in the first half. SMU, 12.5% in the first half. SMU just kept shooting themselves in the foot in the first half, and give Clemson credit, they took advantage in that first half as well, defensively and offensively, and built up too big of a lead for SMU to come back from.
Absolutely. I believe they scored on both of those turnovers I mentioned, and
yeah,
that's what a team like that is going to do. We know there's still Clemson and still Dabo Swinney, and they still have a lot of talent. You make mistakes against a team like that, they're going to take advantage, and that's exactly what they did. In SMU, they dug themselves a little bit too big of a hole, tied the game again in the last 20 seconds, but that's really the reason they lost this game is because the way they played, especially in the first quarter.
What's the most impressive part of this game for you?
I'll tell you what. It feels like we talk about this guy every time we do a Clemson game. TJ Parker off the edge is a monster. 73.8 overall grade in this game. 7 pressures. This strip sack of Jennings in the first quarter that really turned it upside down early. 5 defensive stops. This season, 87.7 overall grade, 14th among all edge defenders, and 49 pressures is 11th. TJ, true sophomore, is that correct?
Yes.
TJ Parker. This is the guy we're going to talk about first-round stuff next year.
And we need those guys. Because 2026 NFL draft does not look great right now. We need the guys, and I think TJ Parker's the guy for next year. I want to
just credit the Clemson defensive coaching staff because something I noticed last night and then had to go back the last 4 weeks. You know what we finally did, too? That's not a TJ Parker thing. We finally moved Peter Woods back inside.
Thank God.
The last 4 games, the last 4 games he's moved back inside, and Clemson's played maybe their back-to-back their 4 best defensive games of the season.
Shocking.
Putting guys in
the best, one of the best D tackles in the country.
Putting guys in the right spot is a hell of a thing. You're set on the edge with Parker.
Yeah.
Leave Woods inside, and you'll be just fine. It's something I had to look into because I noticed it last night when I was watching. I was like, oh, he's finally back where he's supposed to.
Yeah, 320-pound edge defender was always ridiculous.
Right. So credit to the Clemson's coaching staff for doing the right thing with Peter Woods as well. But TJ Parker's a beast, and we're going to talk about him a lot next year.
And if they leave Peter Woods on the inside, Clemson could have 2 first-round defensive linemen next year, and TJ Parker and
Sammy Brown at linebacker.
Oh, Sammy Brown.
They got some young kids. Avion Terrell's coming back.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
that's another first-round potential player.
This defense took a half a step back this year. They're going to be back next year.
Oh, they're nasty.
They just need to continue to build some consistency offensively.
And speaking of young players, I'm going with Bryant Wesco Jr., the true freshman receiver, outstanding for Clemson in this victory. He caught 8 of his 11 targets for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns with 67 yards after the catch. He caught 2 of 3 contested targets as well. And Dalton, this freshman receiver class is outrageous. I mean, you got guys like Jeremiah Smith, who's an alien. You got guys like Ryan Williams, who's a superstar already. You got Cam Coleman, who's starting to really emerge for Auburn as well. You got superstars. And so it's so easy to forget about the other guys that are true freshman receivers. Bryant Wesco Jr. has been great for them this year. Right now, he's second on the team in receiving yards as just a true freshman. And for a team like Clemson, they used to be, before like LSU and Ohio State really took over, Clemson, for a lot of people, was wide receiver U, right? They got Sammy Watkins, they got DeAndre Hopkins, they got a bunch of other guys. T. Higgins, right. T. Higgins, a bunch of other guys that have been in the NFL as well that have been good players. And then they fell off a cliff. Then they had nobody at wide receiver. And then all of a sudden they became like a Penn State and Georgia, where it's like, dude, you need something at wide receiver for the love of God. They got something now. Because now Bryant Wesco Jr. has really played well all season. And in the biggest game of the year, he was by far their best weapon. So Bryant Wesco Jr., I want to shout him out because he was outstanding, and I don't want him to get forgotten about in what's been an unreal year for true freshman wide receivers. Bryant Wesco Jr. should not be forgotten about because he's also having a terrific year.
Sure is, and I want to shout out Antonio Williams, too. He's been really good down the stretch as well. He's made a lot of big plays for him, and the big completion at the end that set up the game-winning field goal. Those 2 guys, their emergence makes Clemson's passing game a threat in this playoff for sure.
Absolutely. Antonio Williams only a junior as well, so he might be able to come back for another year. And him and Brian Wisco Jr., that could be a dangerous team. If Kate Klubnik comes back again, like that could be really interesting how Clemson
and we know they kind of keep it's kind of static with their roster year over year, right? They don't get a whole lot of transfers.
They don't believe in the transfer portal.
And a whole lot there's not many guys that leave either. We'll say that.
Right.
Dabo keeps those guys in there. I mean, with the amount of talent they have coming back, it sure feels like they should probably be the ACC favorite because they weren't supposed to win it this year.
They're going to be I would bet they're going to be a top 10 team for us in our way too early ranking.
Yeah,
going to next
probably because next year's team sure looks like a year older with all these young kids. They're gonna be even better.
So I want to get to quickly the SMU conversation because Clemson's obviously in now. SMU against Alabama is the one that everyone's talking about right now. SMU, I believe, is the betting favorite to get in according to a bunch of sports books. So I think SMU will get in at the end of the day. I think this is my take on it, Dalton. In a vacuum, I would understand the argument saying Alabama's resume in a vacuum is better than SMU's. In a vacuum. If you just say, hey, take out the fact that they played in a conference title game, you take SMU's 13 games, and you take Alabama's 12 games. I can understand the argument for Bama's 12 games. What I will agree with you, though, SMU should get in because if you do not put the Mustangs in, you set a precedent that, hey, we can punish you for conference title games severely. Like SMU, if they did not play in this game, they were above Alabama to begin with. And now if you take them out, you're saying, hey, because you played in the conference title game and you lost, you're out. I'm worried that if you do this, right? Lashley even said in an interview, I believe it on 3. He said in the interview, hey, if we get left out after losing, I know for a fact there are a lot of coaches that have told me we will be opting out of conference title
Lane
games.
Kiffin said this a few weeks ago. He's like, what is the motivation then?
Right.
What's
and
the
if
point?
you do that, you ruin conference title weekend. You ruin it. And then all of a sudden now, Dalton, if enough teams opt out of conference title weekend, guess what they're going to do? They're going to cancel conference championships. Do you really want that? I think this is such a dangerous precedent that you're setting here if you leave SMU out.
It's not just that. It's this idea, if Alabama were to get in over them, that the only thing that matters is wins and your quality of wins, right? Without the losses being a factor.
Right. They had horrible losses.
The losses have to be a factor.
Yeah.
That Oklahoma game was Alabama's worst game in 20 years.
Yeah.
That's the worst game they played in 20 years. It's not – look, my answer to if, obviously Alabama fans will be upset if it's SMU over them. My answer will be beat Oklahoma and Vandy, and we wouldn't have this conversation.
Right.
If Alabama was 11-1, first of all, they'd be in the SEC title game anyway.
Yeah.
But don't play like that against Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I don't even think the precedent argue. It would be a bad precedent. It would be a horrible precedent to set.
I think it would affect future years for sure.
But the idea that Alabama is like without flaws and just because they beat Georgia and they have big wins, and also this thing, it's not like they played anybody out of conference. They played Wisconsin and
also that's my favorite.
They played Wisconsin and USF.
These people, the Alabama thing is like, okay, well you put SMU and then all of a sudden you're saying, well, let's just schedule BS out of conference games. It's like, dude, Alabama's losses were all in conference. Like, what are we talking? It's not like they lost like a difficult out of conference game. Like, that's not even part of the equation.
They played
here.
Wisconsin and USF out of conference.
Yeah,
but they struggled with USF.
But everyone is making that argument saying, oh, well, let's just. Also, SMU played a much harder out of conference game in BYU than Alabama did.
Well, they played BYU and they played TCU.
Right.
Who's at least decent.
Right. So it's like, why are we talking about out of conference games? That has nothing to do with this at all. That's all I'm like, what are we talking about with that? That makes no sense at all. But you can't just have it where, this team won 9 games and these were the 9 wins. No, the losses matter.
Losing matters.
Yeah.
And I understand trying to look at a team's ceiling, and there's probably people that say, okay, Alabama's ceiling is higher than SMU's. I would even agree with that, sure. When they've played their best, they've looked fantastic. But those things matter. Losing to 6-6 teams, and one of them, look, let's be real, the Vandy loss, even though the score was tight, they had the ball for 18 minutes. Their defense got dominated in that game, and the Oklahoma game, again, was the worst game they've played in 20 years. That has to matter. Yeah. And losing to Tennessee, another playoff team, I mean, these things have to matter. Your losses have to matter. Yeah. It's just, that's the thing. Like, they're 9-3 for a reason. They're not just they racked up 9 wins. We can't ignore the 3 games they lost. So, no, I think SMU should be in on merit. You mentioned the 2 losses were extremely close to 2 top 20 teams. They went 11-1 in the regular season, and I was of the belief the whole time they should have been in regardless of whether they won or lost. Yeah. And the fact that we were at halftime thinking about a blowout could knock them out, I don't think that should have been the case anyway, but that's the thinking we have, especially with what we saw with the ACC last year with Florida State, I'm sure the ACC is particularly traumatized with all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're sitting there on pins and needles right now going, boy, it's really – I mean, that's the other precedent is
ACC, you're essentially a group of 5 if you do that.
Right.
Like
and the SEC, we're just trying to shoehorn a 4th team in there because that's the way we want the math to work.
I care about the future of college football a lot, and I just know if they do this, there will be teams opting out of conference title games.
Oh, yeah.
And that would fucking suck for college football.
Yeah.
That would suck for college football if you do that. So I don't think it's worth it to do it. So, yeah, we both think SMU should get in. We'll see very, very soon in about 38 minutes now what the college football playoff bracket will be. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.